don't have a plan. We don't have a plan out yet in Tulare Lake, not because we're not working on it, but because there's a lot of, every time a chapter comes out, there's required revisions by each individual GSA, and then it goes back into the sausage making process, and it's just taking more time than anticipated. We're still trying to balance the needs of our region with the requirements of the state. I think that's a fair statement. And it's very arduous right now. I think that's a fair statement too. I hope that we have the draft by the end of this week and is available for adoption next week. If many of you are following it, I have the public hearing again scheduled for next Thursday to adopt the Tulare Lake Plan, and I'm hopeful that will happen, but I'm not 100% sure at this point. So that is the update on the status of where we are with Tulare Lake's revisions. I think the not to take Amir's time from him, but I think that the hardest part of the revision is the subsidence portion of the document. And now we see as well in the Mid-Kings area, there's been significant pushback to some of their plans for funding mitigation, as well as individual aquifer allocations. And these things take time and landowner participation. And so Tulare Lake's having some issues. I think it's just been a really rough road. So that's not the most hopeful of statements, but it's not because the GSAs aren't working on it. It's just that each GSA has its own stakeholders with different interests, and those interests have to be considered, and makes for revisions to the plan difficult.
So Deanna, Jeff, it just seems like if you guys do not issue a updated plan to Tulare Lake before that hearing, it's like not showing up at court. Yeah, you're just guilty. Because the only official document that you have, I mean, the GSPs that are in force are the ones you adopted in July of 2022. And you don't really get any credit for anything that you've done since then until you actually updated a GSP. So what's the barrier? Is it not finished, or are there disagreements, or is there anything anybody can do to help to get an updated GSP submitted to the state prior to that middle of April hearing?
Yeah, I agree with you. Hey Stacy, if you could go off and just call Amir too. If you could call him offline, please. I agree, and it also takes away the legal argument that our document that they are presenting to this, the state staff is presenting to state board, is moot. There's a legal argument to be made there. If we don't have the plan, we can't make that legal argument. And really the barrier is we're trying to get a plan together that everybody will sign off on. And there are definitely differences in opinion of what that means right now, I think. And that's kind of behind the scenes,
Well, this is not the first time that you've had brinksmanship in the Tulare Lake Subbasin. So this tactic has been used twice before, as far as I remember. And is that same issue what's causing the problem this time? Or
no,
is it a different?
it's not really that. It is how we're going to address subsidence, and what's going to be acceptable to the state, and where some people maybe want to put a flag in the ground and say, we're not going to slow subsidence as quickly as some of us believe the state's going to require. So,
Oh, but see, the thing about it is though, is that you try to guess what the state's gonna accept, but you really don't know. But if that causes paralysis, you're just guilty because you didn't do it.
yeah, I
So
agree.
you're almost better off finding the common ground, the point at which you can all agree and at least get that in.
Yeah,
And say, we've agreed to this and we're still working on it. And actually formally, but I just cannot, I think this has been hammered home, an official action by the GSAs, which are legal entities that take a legally enforced action, is just critical.
point is well taken, Jeff. I agree 100%. And it's not that everybody's not working towards that. It's just,
Well,
I
the
guess every
cost of
time
running
a
out,
chapter comes out, the revisions come back to the consultants, and then they rewrite, and then it comes back and the revisions go back. And at some point, you're right, you just have to say, that's it.
this is it.
Yeah. So
Miss
Amir texts me, he's gonna get on. Maybe he can give us an update on timeline. That would be fantastic.
Miss Deanna, before
Yes.
we get into the meat of it, by the way, I'm not doing a story today. I'm just learning.
That's great.
Yes.
I appreciate that. I think right now, coming into this probationary hearing, less news is best news. So
Yeah. I have a question that I would like either myself, because I intend to go up there, Lord willing, on the 16th to SAC, but if I don't or something happens, my question is, and I don't believe this has been asked before, what expertise does state board staff have in managing the sub-basins groundwater better than the millions of dollars and countless hours of studies focused specifically there? How can they actually step in and do a better job? And who's going to be, I would really like to know individual names of state board staff assigned to what tasks and what plan do they have? And is that available? I haven't seen it if it is.
no, I don't have an answer for that, Don.
I know, but I mean, I think it's a valid question. And I hope somebody asks it if I don't get that opportunity to. And I look in another thing they did, which brings back the November meeting in Hanford. They're still calling themselves sovereign. Now, it says in there that under the law of the commons, the English law, the Roman rule, that the entities, the government entities are considered the sovereign under law of the commons. And that brings up a question that I asked, are we citizens? Are we subjects? I think it's a very important point, and I know it might seem like minutia to some, but if we have a public agency that's considering itself royalty, that's a problem in this Republican democracy of ours. So that's my 2 cents on the whole thing. But I would like to find out what plan they have that's any better than the plan you guys got. And are they going to pay you for accessing all the work that they use from your plan to develop their own? Are they going to reimburse you for those costs?
Yeah, I truly hope you're there. I hope you bring a bus of people with you, Don. I do. And, those are good questions. They remain to be answered. And, they're going to end up with a lot of our treasure from this area if we go into probation. And so they're going to have some transparency in what they do. Welcome, Amir.
I apologize. I'm so sorry. I got stuck in another meeting and it completely escaped me. I apologize for everybody having to wait. Yeah, sorry.
So I kind of just gave an overview of where we're at with Tulare Lake with the document. And so, but everybody's interested in what you think the timeline is for that document.
Yeah, so we are hoping to have a final document prepared by the end of next week and having that, ready and submitted to the state. We're getting close. The individual chapters, with one exception, have been reviewed by the different GSAs, and then they've given us input. We are, of course, incorporating that input into the document. I think you'll find that the document is, it included in the document, I should say, is going to be a table that shows all of the comments that we received from DWR on the inadequate determination and from State Board on the draft staff report. I know you're all aware that the final staff report came out late, around 4 o'clock or something yesterday. I haven't had a chance to go through the final staff report. Sarah Sugar from State Board staff sent me this morning a email that shows the red lines that we requested, so we can easily see where some of the changes in the document between the draft documents and the final staff. She referenced a Appendix C that apparently was revised, or actually is a new appendix that was created to address comments received to date. So let me finish off talking about the GSP, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the staff report. The one chapter that remains to be reviewed is the project's management actions. That's been a little bit of a challenge. We thought we had identified all the project management actions, but a couple of the GSAs have asked us to add a few things, so we're in the process of doing that right now. Just so you guys know, it's a pretty, the document has been extensively revised, meaning there's very little of the 2020 GSP that's still in there, with one major exception, and that is the basin setting chapter. We didn't touch that. We basically added, if you will, for lack of a better term, we added an addendum to it that specifically addresses some of the basin setting without going through and having to rewrite all the geology and all of that kind of stuff that was already previously accepted by DWR. The SMC chapter is the one that you're probably going to all be more focused in on. It talks about what the undesirable results for all of the different sustainable indicators are. So just quickly, we're basically going with a measurable objective for groundwater levels at essentially the 2015 water level. The MTs, the minimum thresholds, will be about 30 feet below that level. So we base that on, we set that criteria. We then went back and looked at a well database. We took the Oscar database, we threw it out. We took the USGS database and the Kings County database. And we basically said that that database is what we're going to use for determining how many wells will be impacted at the MT level. The MO was, like I said, was set at 2015. So any well that was completed above the 2015 water level is not being considered as an impact. That's already, that well has either been impacted or already been replaced. We then make, I just want to be clear on this, we then go back and say, hey, we understand that if we're wrong and it turns out that a well is impacted above that 2015 water level that we said, and it still exists, and they're still using it, it's still active, then it still will be part of a well registration program, and we'll identify it as that, and it will be eligible for the well mitigation program in Tulare Lake. So using our criteria, about 7% of the wells in Tulare Lake would be impacted if we hit the MT. And Tulare Lake has 3 zones, 3 aquifers. There's an A zone, which is not prevalent at all in the Tule, just so everybody knows. It's at the top 100 feet or so. So there's we looked at A zone mitigation, we looked at B zone, and below the clay, which we're calling the C zone in Tulare Lake. I'm sorry, I'm taking a little pause to see if anyone has any questions, and I don't know if anyone has their hand up.
You're doing great, Amir. I think we're all tracking with you.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure I know I'm throwing a fire hose of stuff at you. Just want to,
No, we're following.
and I apologize. You guys know what we've been working on, so I'm sorry I don't have a slide. I wasn't going to take the time to make a slide today, and I'm sorry about that, and Deanna's laughing, she knows. We've had lots of conversations about this. So groundwater levels, well registration program, well mitigation program. I'm going to go into the PMAs in a second, and especially for Tri-County in particular. When I say PMAs, I mean projects and management actions, just for everybody. Sorry if I use an acronym that someone on the call is not familiar with, please stop me and I'll clarify. So the next thing was subsidence. We set 2 minimum thresholds for subsidence. One is based on a total cumulative subsidence between 2023 moving forward, okay, to 2040, and that is set at 6 feet. So this was a point of contention between Tom Harder and myself yesterday on a call. He was unfortunately, he was mistaken. He was under the impression we were sitting at a 2020, but look, whatever subsidence has happened has already happened. We are here to prevent subsidence from moving forward and getting to 0. So total subsidence, maximum subsidence is going to be 6 feet. That's not 6 feet across the entire subbasin. It's 6 feet at the areas we're having the highest subsidence. Second thing was a rate of subsidence on an annual basis. And if we exceed either one of those 2, we've exceeded our MT, and we need to take corrective action. And that corrective action is going to be specifically demand reduction in the areas that we're exceeding the MT. Okay, so if we exceed the rate in any given year, we've got to take some action in that specific area. Not across the entire subbasin, because the rest of the subbasin may not have that same issue. It's the areas where the subsidence is happening. So the commitment is there to, is to take action. The document does specify if this happens, then we will take these steps, and it's clearly laid out as part of the document.
Amir, what's the MT for the rate?
Yes. I'm sorry. That's probably helpful. So I will tell you, it's a gradual, slow, movement downward. So for the first, I can't remember, 3 to 4 years, it's 0.7, and then it nosedives from there for another few years at 0.3, and then it essentially at 2040, we are looking at a rate of 0 subsidence. I will be honest with you guys, our approach is about getting the subsidence under control, and we will probably end up using every bit of those 6 feet if we have some dry years. But we are making a commitment in this document to get that under control and to address it as it is happening in true adaptive management, not waiting. We're not going to have 2 feet of subsidence in 1 year and then pray that we have a wet year. That's not going to be the case at all. The 6 feet was determined based on the north-south canal systems and how much more subsidence we thought that they could, take without having negative impacts. And those negative now, sorry, I probably should have written some of this down, but those negative impacts, in some cases, some of the GSAs have said that they will pay to mitigate those impacts, and that's fine. That's their decision, and the GSA can do that. But the difference between what we're saying in this report and previous is that we're not relying on that mitigation per se. We're essentially going to say that we need to get subsidence to 0. So yes, in the meantime, between now and 6 feet, if you have an issue, you can mitigate for that. But at the end of the day, the 6 feet is our hard limit.
So the difference between you and Tom, Amir, was your starting point on the 6
Yes.
feet?
Yeah,
Where was Tom's starting point?
2020,
Where was yours?
2023.
And how much difference is it in reality? Is it a 6 feet at 2023 is what, how much subsidence has occurred between 2020 and 2023?
In the worst areas, about 2.5 feet.
So they were at 7, I believe, in the
Yeah,
two.
they're at 7. Yeah.
So they were, so have you guys come to an agreement on a common? Did you have an arm wrestle and whoever won you pick?
We did have an arm wrestle, and I did reach out to Deanna, in fact, first thing this morning, and I asked her.
You mean you used Deanna as the fulcrum for
No,
the?
no. I asked her if we could have Tom come in and present to the board next week so that the board could hear Tom's, I was going to say not his side, but his rationale.
You need to be on the same page if you can be.
Yeah, I know we're trying.
Deanna will have to pick which child she
Yeah, she
have
look.
to play Solomon.
It's
She
interesting,
straddles the
Jeff.
boat.
One of the things that the state called me out on in the Tule Subbasin is that I've been trying to homogenize a lot between both sides of Tri-County and kind of have same rules and regulations. They didn't really like that. They said, in the Tule, you be with the Tule. It's kind of how I read some of their comments. So
Well, fortunately, you got thick skin and you're gonna do the right thing.
that's right. That's right.
I mean, at this point,
The two, and you have the Kauai in there too. We have a 3 basin issue and everybody has a little bit different. I think we're close enough. I wouldn't stop momentum,
oh no.
but
if you can,
yeah,
this one, because numerically, they gotta be really close.
right.
So I think, Jeff, you probably know Kauai's numbers better than I do, but the last I'd heard that they were still at around 9 feet.
Yeah, and they were told that they needed, that probably wasn't gonna fly.
Do you know if that's 9 feet from today?
Well, it's Tom's 9 feet, so I'm assuming that's Tom is the hydrogeologist for both, although he's got some partners up in the Kauai. But I
Right.
think Tom is pretty involved in the subsidence on Kauai also. So however way he did for Tule is probably what he's thinking for Kauai.
Look,
But the difference between it was 7 in the Tule and 9 in the Kauai, but when he brought that to the stakeholder committee, the comments were, if Tulare Lake's 6, Tule's 7, we can't be 9.
Yeah.
But now I find out it's 6 or 7 from different base periods. So
Yes.
you
Yeah,
gotta-
and I don't know
gotta
what base.
you got to kind of figure out what the effective difference is there. And I also think it's important, Amir, what you said, which is that it's concentrated on the areas that are subject to subsidence.
Yes. Yes.
It's not like we're going to let the whole subbasin drop 7 feet.
No, that's not the intent at all. And I want to make that clear. And by the way, Tom he also has it laid out in the Tule. I haven't seen anything for Kauai, but I've seen it for Tule yesterday. And in fact, I'm gonna show you guys a slide. Stacy, can I share my screen? Oh, I can't.
Tom presented yesterday at the Lower Tule and Pixley planning commissions.
Oh, he did.
I
Okay.
was at the Pixley, I saw it, but I don't think other people on the call, man. So if there's something there you want to show, that'd be
Yeah, I
great.
was just gonna share a screen real quickly. I'm not gonna go through all the slides, but I just want to share one. So as you can see on the slide here, this is what Jeff was referring to, where you see the amount of subsidence in some areas is much higher, and as we move eastward in the Tule subbasin, you can see that the amount of subsidence decreases. This slide is slightly out of date. I believe what Tom presented yesterday decreases some of the subsidence in the Delano Early Mart area to like 1 to 2 feet as well. So that 1 to 2 foot contour has been extended into more of Delano Early Mart. But this is the plan is basically to say, hey, look, we're not allowing 7 feet everywhere. It's not going to be this, and the areas where they don't have much subsidence, we want to continue to limit that amount of subsidence. The concern that I have is that, sorry, I'm going to flip through a few slides here, if you just bear with me. I'm just picking on one location. In fact, let me see if I can, oh, that's okay. Let me use that one there, because that one is actually a well that's in Tri-County. And what you can see up here is the amount of subsidence. The green triangles are water levels. And what Tom is essentially saying is, in some cases, if water levels get up high enough, you can start to see areas where there are time periods where the subsidence is kind of flattened out and we have minimal subsidence. And he's basically saying, look, we can stop subsidence if we keep the water level high enough. And I certainly agree with that statement. What I have heartburn with is if you lose 2.5 feet, you're essentially down to about 4 feet or a little bit over 4 feet of subsidence, 4.5 feet of subsidence. And I don't think we can slow that down. It would be too rapid a change over the next 16 years. And it would have significant impacts in my opinion. So this is just me talking, and this was part of the discussion with Tom yesterday. Was trying to agree upon a rate. It's one thing if you have 7 feet and there's a rate. It's a different thing if you have 4.5 feet and you have the rate. So
Amir, and if I ask too pointed of a question, I'm trying to learn. But this slide was presented at the Pixley meeting yesterday because this is part of Tom's. And this particular location is of great interest to lots of folks. And you can see these green triangles that are way below the minimum threshold line. There's 2 below, there's 1 on, right? October
Right.
20.
This is what Jeff's referring to.
Okay, so if the MT is established as is proposed in this slide here for this particular well site, is Tri-County prepared to enforce that MT on the well field that sits right next to it?
Okay, so Jeff, I'm glad you said that, but I also want to be clear that well field is not the only pumping going on at that depth in those areas. And that's been where people have maybe rejected, not rejected, but haven't thought this through. What we basically would be saying is that wells in Lower Tule and Pixley pumping are also affecting it. And there seems to be the way that is being presented to everyone is that, oh, this is an Angiola well, or this is a Tri-County well, and that only this well's pumping is affecting those water levels. And these are meant to be representative wells, and that the MT would be representative of all wells in that area. And
Okay, so, and that's a very fair point, but I guess the question is since there is a different jurisdiction, right? Cause you got Pixley and Lower Tule, and then you also have Tri-County, all converging in this, right in this zone. Are all three of those GSAs prepared to enforce that minimum threshold on the wells that are within their jurisdiction?
we're focused on reducing subsidence, and if we believe that we need time in order to have a smooth landing and to get to zero subsidence. But we are committed, and Deanna, correct me if I say any of this wrong, or if I overstep my bounds, but we are committed to getting to zero. And that does mean, Jeff, what you're talking about does mean that we have to maintain water levels in that areas. But trying to do that overnight, we're not committed to that.
And frankly, there's a lack of monitoring sites. If you look at it, you have that point, and then you have a middle of Pixley Point. So there's some issues with, from my perspective, the amount of monitoring sites and what that representative monitoring site represents. What's the area it represents? And that's still unclear.
Is part of your management actions to develop a couple more monitoring sites in these very sensitive areas?
I just at the end of last week, Tom had sent out a memo, and on the groundwater levels, and Deanna and I very pointedly pointed out that the monitoring network is completely inadequate and needs to have several new locations added, and that we need to commit to that in this GSP document. The monitoring network, and by the way, that statement is also true in Tulare Lake, and we're committing to drill as many as almost 30 new wells in Tulare Lake. Now, some of them will be, literally not 30 new locations, but there may be a B zone and a C zone well located, close by, but we're committing to a total of more than 30 wells in Tulare Lake.
Monitoring wells, is that what you're talking about?
Monitoring wells, or if we can find appropriate existing wells, we will use those, but we are looking at adding 30 more points to our monitoring network in Tulare Lake. And I haven't seen that similar type of number in the Tule, and that's one of the things that we pointed out, and have pointed out numerous times to the Tule subbasin.
What's the Mayor? What's the main obstacle to adding wells? Is it cost or availability of location?
Yeah, Don, I don't want to speak on behalf of the entire subbasin, but there's, as you all know, the cost of wells has skyrocketed, in the last few years, and it really does come down to cost, and then trying to find an appropriate landowner willing to allow us to drill on their wells, or their site, I should say. And so all of these things need to be coordinated and need to be spelled out in the document. So in Tulare Lake, I'll be honest, we didn't have we don't have a map that says, hey, we're going to drill 30 wells at these exact locations. We have a map that says we're going to drill 30 wells in the general, locations of each one. And frankly, they might be in reality tweaked and moved a little bit, but it shows the area that, and what we did in Tulare Lake is we tried to group the same zones of equal number of wells together, so that each representative point represents roughly about 60 wells. And I think the Tule subbasin needs to do something similar so that a representative monitoring location truly is representative of what's happening in the aquifer. I'm not sure I answered your question, Don, but that's the answer you're gonna get.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Jeff, did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I look at, this is very interesting data when you look at the rate of subsidence. I mean, clearly when we're in a dry period and the water levels go down fairly significantly, by 100 feet or more, the rate of subsidence increases. And
Yes.
when the water levels come back up, the subsidence, really, really slows down. So, I mean, you can see in October 22 to October 23, virtually no subsidence.
Right.
I mean, I guess to some extent that's good news. We just got to figure out how to get a alternative water supply. Figure out how to what we did, right? I mean, as we increased demands, as surface supplies became less prevalent, we just kept drilling deeper wells and kept on trucking, and that paradigm has to shift.
Yeah.
And we need time to shift it. The other thing is, I brought this up to Tom, yesterday. And I'll bring it up to you too, Amir. I mean, I think the approach of having a total amount of subsidence, basically between now and the deadline period of 2040, that's a rational approach. And, so no criticism there at all. But there is a certain amount of water that can be withdrawn safely and sustainably from below the Corcoran clay. We need to figure out what that is. And then we're going to have to allocate it just like we allocate the rest of the water. To me, the good news is clearly these hydrographs show you could take some water out of there and be sustainable. But if you take too much is when you really stress it.
So in Tulare Lake, Jeff, we specify the amount of reduction in total pumping. So an actual acre foot number that we want to see happen gradually over time in order to meet the rate of subsidence that we proposed. Now, I will tell you, there is not currently a completed groundwater model for Tulare Lake. So we did our best to estimate that number will need to be revised as the groundwater model is finalized in Tulare Lake. But we felt that, if we're going to commit to a rate of subsidence, the landowners need to be aware of what kind of pumping reductions, none of this allocation or ET or precipitation, none of that stuff matters. At the end of the day, it's how much water are you actually taking out of the ground.
Well, on the deep aquifer, because there's no
return
flows to the deep aquifer.
Yeah, in the deep aquifer. Yeah. So I don't really care, you can come up with your ET numbers or whatever. None of that stuff matters. It's strictly about how much groundwater is pumping and where. Right. So again, we're just talking about the deep aquifer, right?
Right.
And so we proposed some actual numbers of reduction so that the landowners in Tulare Lake can actually see what we're talking about and what kind of challenges that they have in front of them. I'm not saying that those numbers might not be revised when the model comes out. It might be up, it might be down, but that was our best estimate based on the information that we have to date.
Okay, so I guess just for us lay people, when you get a model, and I'm sure you're working on it, eventually you get a model. Models are models, right? They're just math. They look at various relationships. They calculate, relationships between different things that you can actually observe. So this is sort of a model right here in front of us, right? I mean, you got
Right,
groundwater level compared to subsidence, and so you can run the math and create a mathematical model.
right.
But in your experience, what is the error bars on these models? And I just say that because I mean I think, you know, we talk about models and we think that'll tell us exactly what the answer is, and it will tell you the direction you need to go.
Yeah,
It doesn't give you the answer.
look, the reality is what we're gonna manage our adaptive management actions on. So I don't wanna, you know, I don't wanna speculate on the models are always as good as the data going in. We're not in Clear Lake, we're again, since very similar to what the King Subbasin did, we're not over relying on a model. We're basically saying, look, the best thing we can do is get a well registration program, understand exactly how many wells, where they are, how much are they pumping, and then look at the reality of how much what the water levels are and what the subsidence is. And that's one of the reasons that we're adding so many more monitoring points into that area.
Right. Very good. Very good.
The models are a tool. They should be one tool in a lot, and there should be a lot of other things considered as well. I would much rather tell you the reality is that we had, you know, 0.22 feet of subsidence this year based on this much pumping, this water level, than whatever the model predicted. I frankly, I looked at some of the model predictions when I was rewriting the document, and I was like, well, that's not what happened in 2023. So, you know, and the other thing is, you know, we were told pointedly by one of the state board members, she was a little bit concerned that we kept talking about our wet dry cycle, and she goes, it sounds like you're over reliant, or your entire argument is based on these wet years occurring and on these cycles. And she said that you know, that just can't be your only hope and prayer. It's got to be a real management strategy of how you're going to handle that if that doesn't happen. So frankly, I think some of the state board members have given us some excellent suggestions and advice. All right, I'm sorry, I have gotten way off track. So we talked about water levels, we talked about subsidence in Tulare Lake. The other, I'm going to just quickly mention water quality for Tulare Lake. As I mentioned, we're looking at putting in more monitoring points. One of the things that's very obvious is that our water quality monitoring in the shallow zones where the domestic wells are located is extremely limited. We've been counting on water levels, water quality data from, you know, deep municipal wells, and that's not going to be sufficient. So we're of course going to coordinate with like the Irrigated Lands Program for Sea Salts, of course. But we also understand that we have to do some groundwater quality monitoring. And so there is a very specific groundwater quality monitoring sampling and analysis plan also included in the Tulare Lake document that is going to specify every quarter which wells we're sampling, in addition to using the data from other sources. We don't want to duplicate what others are doing, but we also understand that if we're going to truly address the water quality issues, we've got to do some of our own sampling as well. Okay, let me stop sharing. Questions, comments, concerns about I'm open to anything that you guys might want to talk about. So I've talked about Tulare Lake a lot. On the Tule side, you know, there's some good news too. it looks like the subbasin has agreed on the methodology and water levels that we want to set as MOs and MTs across the subbasin. There seems to be a consistent use of one methodology now, which is a huge plus from previous. The plan is to have the Tri-County document very much mirror what everyone else is doing. We're going to be using some of the same methodologies, same values, those types of things. Than everyone else. We have, that's one of the reasons that we're being as vocal as we are in some of these meetings, is to make sure that what everyone agrees upon is something that we can also agree upon, and we don't end up as a outlier in the future. So we want to make sure that Thule is well coordinated as much as we can, and if others choose not to, that's certainly their decision. But we are, one of the things that Dan and I have pushed very hard for is to include a PMA that has a well registration program. You cannot manage the subbasin and talk about managing groundwater if you don't know how much groundwater you're actually taking out and from where. So we have been rather vocal in advocating for a well registration program across the entire subbasin. We've also been very vocal, as I said earlier, about expanding the monitoring network for both water level as well as water quality. And then we just need to nail down the exact total amount of subsidence. I'm pretty sure I've said this to this group before, but I said to one of the board members a few months ago that when she asked me how much more subsidence we'd be looking at, and I said 9 feet, figuring I'd give myself a little cushion. And I know I probably said this, but she looked at me like I was insane, that there's no way that level of subsidence, that we would, even remotely be considering that much more subsidence. So, it's a fine line of trying to balance the expectations of the state and what their view on what subsidence is, what impacts are occurring because of subsidence, and the reality of what that means in terms of limiting demand reduction for our growers in our economy and in our livelihoods down here. How's that for a depressing the Thule schedule right now is, still we're hoping to pull together the Tri-County document in the May timeframe, and along with the other subbase, or the other GSAs, I should say, and get that submitted. I'm hoping that we're going to be getting close to a final number with everybody that we can agree on here on subsidence pretty quick. I will be very honest, I have not yet personally had a time to review the draft staff report for the Thule subbasin, but it is our intent to comment on that and submit something by the deadline. I would strongly encourage everyone on this call to also read the document and comment and bring forth. The more comments you get, I think the better it shows the level of concern across the subbasin. Dan, am I missing anything?
No, I don't think so. That's pretty much where we are with the two subbasins in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So let me ask another impolite question. To what extent is the lawsuit that Friant and Arvin Edison filed against Eastern Thule, is there any interaction between that and this state board process with the Thule subbasin?
You want to take that?
Yeah, I think that there has been a lot of discussions at the state level from the Friant Water Authority with the state. And the state is extremely concerned with the Friant Kern Canal. But any discussions that have been between the subbasin or the GSA with the state, I've been outside of Tri-County, so I assume Eastern Thule is having some discussions. But how that's, what that means for changing the document, I'm not certain at this time, so. They feel, I think Eastern Thule feels like it has a management plan and it's enacting it. And things, it did have some subsidence while it was enacting it, but it is adaptive management and they're still enacting it and intend to move forward with it. So Amir, did they change water levels at the Friant Kern Canal site? I don't recall.
I don't believe they
I
did.
don't think so either.
I think it's only up in Porterville, the only areas that we changed the water levels. We raised them a bit in the Porterville area.
Yeah, so how that's gonna play out before state board in September, I'm uncertain.
So, yeah, obviously, because all that interaction between those parties is all behind closed doors, right? It's all in closed session, both on the Friant side, on the Eastern Thule side. So really the public has no way to know. Public's interested in whether the Thule subbasin goes into probation. The public comments by some of these entities around the state board staff, it almost seems like, they're cheering the state board staff on, calling this out. So, we're out here in a peanut gallery trying to keep track of what's going on. And anytime I can get someone who's on the inside and ask them a question,
There seems to me to be a little bit,
try to learn a little bit more.
seems to me to be a little small disconnect with the Friant Water Authority. I mean, the word that I've got from them when I've had discussions is, this is really centered on Friant Kern Canal. We really hope the state, deals with everybody else kind of separately. Is this just Friant Kern, Eastern Thule? And that's really not how this plays out in front of state board, right? You're a sub-basin. If you have one area of concern, likely it's going to affect the entire sub-basin. So, for better or for worse, it will likely have a big impact on what happens at that hearing.
Stay tuned, I guess, huh?
Yeah, Jeff, I will say, I think the Thule subbasin has a very good shot at avoiding probation. I think there's a lot of things that it has, basically come out in the discussions with, and certainly Sawyer Lake being the example. There's a lot of things, and I think the meetings with the state board members have been very positive. I think they've been very productive. And it's good for everyone to hear that. And I'm very thankful that the state board members have agreed, that they're dealing with a lot of things, as you all know. One of them rattled off a few of their, issues that they're currently dealing with. And yeah, there's, significant other water issues in California, as you all know. But I think the Thule subbasin does have a very good shot at avoiding, the probationary process. And but I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying it's not going to be painless.
Well, I really appreciate that, Amir. Appreciate your comments. I would tend to agree with you, but there's a black knowledge hole on the dispute on the Bryant Kern, and that's the one, you know, that's the one fly in the ointment, so to speak, of what I mean, the Thule has, you know, tough facts. You're in a dry part of the valley, right? And, you know,
Right.
very heavy ag presence and, you know, a lot of dairy, which is why I pay so much attention to it.
Right.
But, you know, early out there acknowledging the problem, early out there developing, you know, the structures, good stakeholder involvement, you know, in the Pixley and the lower Thule and even Eastern Thule. I mean, I went to those meetings early on. They had a very active stakeholder. There's been you know, as opposed to, you know, frankly, there hasn't been a whole lot of stakeholder involvement in some of the other parts of Tulare Lake. And
Yes,
you know,
I agree.
and that's coming to bite them now.
Yes,
You know,
I
it's
agree.
last minute, they're trying to do the right thing. I mean, I think what's being done is structurally, policy wise, the correct approach, but because you haven't done the groundwork in some of these places to let your landowners and stakeholders be involved in it, they're
Yeah.
just learning about it now, and so you got a bit of a firestorm there. But Thule was out front, so I agree with you. But it is concerning. I was hugely impressed, you know, a couple of years ago when Bryant was able to reach an agreement with Eastern Thule. Given my history, you know, my observation of the water industry, those big tough issues usually end up years in court, and somehow or another they came up with an agreement. So that was great. But then, you know, now we're in court, and that's, you know, usually court is just about you know, increasing the pain level. And the end of the day, you gotta negotiate something.
Yeah.
But anyway, all right. Well, thanks. I've been impolite enough, and I will.
No, no.
Back to being
Appreciate
quiet.
it. I just want to, yeah, no, I appreciate your comments. I just was taking a quick look to see if anybody else had their hand raised. Deanna, I'm sorry, I don't even have the agenda in front of me. I apologize.
Well, we had an update on MLRP and the Allensworth project.
Yes. MLRP and Allensworth. So let me talk about Allensworth first. Is Kathy on? I thought I saw her name. Kathy, are you on? Yeah, there you are.
Yes, I am. I'm just listening.
All right. So I'll talk a little bit about Allensworth, and if you can maybe jump in on MLRP.
Sure. The only thing I would add on MLRP is that they have the workshop coming up on April 17th. And that's going to be at the Ag Center, the Tulare Ag Center. And that's going to be from 3 to 5 o'clock. They're going to be going over some options for land repurposing. And it's from 3 to 5. It's kind of a seminar. So that's the only thing. I think Stacy, they'd like the GSAs to send that announcement out weekly if you can, just to keep it on people's radar.
Yes, it's on my calendar.
Great.
Could
So
you
that's
repeat that
really,
date?
Oh.
Could you repeat the date of that workshop?
it's the
Please.
day after the Tulare Lake hearing. It's April 17th.
So I will say, you know, the MLRP process and the fact that we're going to be preparing a land repurposing program, you know, document for specific to Tri-County. It is our plan to include that obviously as one of our, you know, significant projects and management actions, because if land is going to be taken out of production voluntarily, we want to make sure that there is a plan for, you know, the continued economic use of that repurposed land. So I think this is an important process to stay engaged in, and for those of you that are landowners, you know, I'd highly recommend you know, getting actively involved in the MLRP process. It's your opportunity to talk about, hey, if we do again voluntarily decide to fallow some land, what what can we do with it? You know, what are our options, and how do you continue to see some economic benefit from that? And you know, everyone is obviously concerned about what these pumping limitations in Sigma might have. You know, this is a good opportunity to weigh in on that, as Jeff said a minute ago. You know, stakeholder engagement is a key part of the process, and the people who show up are the ones whose voices get heard. Oh, the Allensworth project. Let me talk a little bit about that. So we have completed our civil design of the basin. The next process now is to put together the bid documents, take it out to bid, and then start construction. And we want to be in construction this year, and we want to be completed by early 2025. So you know, we've got to get moving here, because the grant runs out in the middle of 25, which seemed like a long time ago when we received the grant in 22, but is quickly approaching. And you know, we are very much concerned that not just our project, but all the other projects also get completed on time. We don't, you know, we've had some delays due to the weather and other things, but I think all of that has been addressed. So we want to move forward on getting the bid documents out there, and getting contractors, and then dealing with the reality of what contractors are charging today. You know, but it's just essentially, it's a big earth moving project. As most of you know, it's part of hopefully a bigger plan, but we want to at least get the basin built, so that the next time there are releases on the White River, we've got a spot to put that water, or at least some of it, and we can reduce flooding impacts. We can also capture that water for reuse. Don, did you have a question? Oh, no.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, no, I don't.
Okay, sorry. Sorry, I misheard. So that's where we're at, Deanna, on Allensworth. It is, you know, there's a deadline approaching, so we're probably going to be moving quickly to get the bid documents out, and the you know, we'll need to have some discussion on exactly what those look like, and who's holding the contract, and all those details here in just the next week or so.
Well, while we're on the subject of Allensworth, I will just say, in a reading Appendix C of the Tulare Lake report, final report just came out, you will notice that they reached out individually to each of the communities for comment. And I received a phone call yesterday from Allensworth Representative Desiree, and the state board has reached out directly to Allensworth for comment. And it brightened my evening so much, because she said that they, you know, wanted to make sure I was okay with them commenting, and that it would be very positive in our relationship. And it really again, it's been a couple slogging weeks getting through what we're working on, and to hear that was fantastic. And I know this project is so important to the community. They really, you know, they're looking at the site for their wastewater treatment plant, and they're just excited about it. And so I'm thankful for that relationship, and I'm really glad that we're moving forward with this, and looking forward to moving some dirt. So it's exciting.
That's great. Yeah, they've been a really good partner. I don't know if anybody's on who's, no, I don't see anybody. Okay. Yeah, what else is on our agenda?
You know, that's really it. I told everybody at the beginning of the meeting, it's really just an update on where we're at. And so we have, you know, our upcoming meetings. We have our board meeting next week. for the public hearing for the document. And so, but we will have a board meeting regardless of what happens there. We'll have a board meeting. It'll be a short agenda. And then we have an advisory committee meeting on April 24th, which I'm sure we'll get an update on the state board hearing at that time. You know, hopefully we'll be moving on from Tulare Lake revisions at that time and into new areas. So I think that's where we're at, and that, you know, ends us early today.
Yeah. Any questions from anyone in the audience?
Just want to thank you for your transparency, and, you know, it's a small group, but you take our questions and do your best to give us honest and transparent answers, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
And good luck. It's I did see Dennis. I saw Dennis Mills yesterday, and what a grueling week he had.
He had a very grueling week.
And he did well. I mean, to be up there, and I mean, it's just a really crappy time. And then you know, the state boards dumped their last staff report on top of everybody yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, that was promised some time ago, and we were pretty disappointed to be getting it that late. And funny thing was, I literally looked that morning and said, "Hey, still not out." And I sent out an email to all the GSA members saying, "Yeah, I checked. There's no staff report." And I was, you know, kind of critical of the state board for taking so long. And then comes out that afternoon, so that'll teach me to you know, to poke that.
Yeah, but
finger, I
Well,
guess.
you just got to, at this point, you got to do the right thing and do it. I do think it's really, really, really critical to get a GSP formally adopted and submitted, and then we'll see what happens.
Didn't the state board, didn't they promise to get that out earlier? I mean, how late are they on their deadline?
So
Or do they just set it floating?
So Don, technically, they only have to have it out 10 days before a board meeting. But they had told us, you know, that they would try and have that out much earlier, at least a month before the hearing. I think, to be honest, Don, I think what they were waiting for is the board to make a decision on the funding and the fees. I shouldn't say funding, but I should say fees. And that was recently made at a board hearing or a board meeting, and they incorporated that into the final document. So
I think you can thank Vanden Heuvel for that.
Yeah, Appendix C indicated too, they were waiting on a meeting with tribal concerns.
oh, right, yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah, but that fee reduction, you can thank Jeff Vanden Heuvel for that.
I want no credit. I want no blame.
Well,
You know what they say, success has 1,000 mothers and failure is an orphan.
yeah, failure is an orphan is, yeah, so, you know, no, you know, we appreciated all of the comments that were put in on that. And I still don't agree with the number that was selected by the state board, but we'll leave it at that. I still think it's gonna raise a ridiculous amount of money, you know, if even in one sub-basin, much less if, you know, more get put into probation. So
I think that we still need to be focused on, I mean, for the objective for April 16 is to have a updated GSP formally submitted to them.
yes,
Have you guys take your hour, make your case, have good
Right.
community support, raising all of these issues. And then those 5 state board members have to take the totality of what they've received and the fact that you've just given them an updated GSP that's enforceable.
Right.
And they need to give you more time. They pushed everybody else back. They did not push you back. You've got a good argument if you can get a GSP into them that they should give you some more time, another 6-8 months. And that'll give you a little breathing room to start working your way through, these other things. That's the best outcome. I think that's a very realistic outcome. If you can do, but the part you gotta do is you gotta get that GSP in.
Yeah, no, I hear you, Jeff. Believe me, I hear you loud and clear, but and your points are well taken.
All right, well, hey, back to work, huh?
All right, back to work.
Because spending the last hour and 15 minutes with us was not work.
I appreciate everybody. Thank you all
All
for your
right,
comments.
appreciate
Thank you
you
for
too.
attending.
Thank you.